Former Attorney General Pam Bondi threw Donald Trump under the bus, threw Todd Blanche, the acting Attorney General, under the bus, threw FBI Director Kash Patel under the bus, and boy, did she supply the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee with some powerful evidence for a future impeachment of Donald Trump. So as I'm sure you know by now, on Friday, Pam Bondi appeared before the House Oversight Committee. She was subpoenaed to appear, yet when she showed up, she refused to testify under oath. She refused to testify while being filmed on videotape, and instead she said she's just appearing for an informal interview. That's all she would allow, and because the Republicans control the House Oversight Committee, James Comer said that is the format. Sadly, Democrats don't have the ability yet, since they don't control the committee, to set those ground rules, even though Hillary Clinton had a under oath videotape deposition and she was never even in the Epstein files. But what was fascinating was Pam Bondi's testimony. So at first she was asked a question about Donald Trump's dark past and Donald Trump's past relationship with Epstein. What do you know about Donald Trump's relationship? Did he tell you? Was that concerning to you? And as you'll hear right here, Democratic Congressmember Walkinshaw was very surprised by Bondi's answer. And she basically said, "I'm not certain the extent of Donald Trump's knowledge," implying that she's aware that he has lots of knowledge about Epstein's behavior, but I'm not aware. And then, right after Bondi said that, her lawyer, or the person purporting to be her lawyer, who is a top DOJ prosecutor, who claimed to be now representing Bondi in the private practice capacity of a DOJ lawyer, someone named Harmeet Dillon, said, "I'm just a private lawyer right now. I'm not a prosecutor," even though she's like the number 2 or 3 at the entire Justice Department. Then she started jumping in and refused to allow Pam Bondi to answer any question about Donald Trump's cover-up of the child sex trafficking ring, about Donald Trump's involvement with Epstein, about Donald Trump's personal conduct and behavior with Jeffrey Epstein. The Justice Department then interrupted and objected because they realized Bondi had said too much. But also, in objecting and now asserting some sort of privilege, that Donald Trump has a privilege where no one can talk about Donald Trump's dark past or Trump's cover-up of the Epstein files, what it also did was provide a roadmap into the broader cover-up taking place of the Epstein files by Donald Trump, by Todd Blanche, and by Kash Patel, because now we know for sure that the millions of documents that have not been produced are also being withheld on the same grounds that this DOJ lawyer, Harmeet Dillon, is objecting to and not letting Pam Bondi respond to after Bondi answered that first question about Donald Trump in a way that Trump and Trump's DOJ did not want Bondi to answer like that. So all of those other documents we can reasonably assume are being withheld on privilege. And we can also, I think, take a step forward and, in my opinion, say it's our opinion that you're probably withholding all of those documents on the basis of their connection to Donald Trump. And you're saying all of this is privilege. Now, this also follows a blockbuster Bloomberg article, hat tip to Jason Leopold, who's been really on it there, and some of the other writers there, who determined as well that lots of documents, potentially millions of documents from the DOJ, are being withheld that involve Epstein's involvement in many other criminal cases and investigations where Epstein may not have been the central figure, but an ancillary figure. So what do we want to know? All those other cases involving Epstein, folks? Here at the MeidasTouch Network, we bring receipts. We go through this piece by piece. Let's do that here. A reminder, hit subscribe. Help us get to 7 million subscribers. Double check that you're subscribed. So Democratic Congress member James Walkinshaw wrote the following: setting aside the circumstances of their supposed falling out, you were asked a different question, Pam Bondi. Did Trump know of Epstein's crimes before they were public knowledge? I read your verbatim response. You might want to clean this up because Donald Trump ain't gonna like this one bit. And Pam Bondi's like, misrepresentation by Walkinshaw. What the world knows to be true is Trump banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago decades ago because Epstein was a despicable creep. Well, that's not what you said. And you could tell she was getting nervous, especially when that DOJ lawyer interjected. Watch what Congressmember Walkinshaw says, what went down. Here, play this clip.
I want to share one piece of information, one question that the former Attorney General did answer. She was asked specifically about Donald Trump, President Trump's awareness of Epstein's crimes before they became public knowledge. She had the opportunity to say Donald Trump certainly wasn't aware of those crimes. She had the opportunity to say, I know Donald Trump, and if he was aware of those crimes, he would have done something. Instead, she said, I don't know. She also said, quote, this is a direct quote, I'm not certain of the extent of his knowledge. I think that's a perfect example as to why we need Pam Bondi under oath in a real deposition for the camera so the American people can see and hear her answers to our questions for themselves.
Then you had Pam Bondi, as I mentioned before, throw Todd Blanche under the bus. Even in her opening statement, Pam Bondi said, I delegated all of the tasks regarding the Epstein files to Todd Blanche. He told me that we were complying, so I trusted him. I had no personal involvement in the review. That was delegated to Todd Blanche. Everybody in that room with Bondi said she blamed everything on Blanche and Kash Patel. And as I'll show you in a little bit regarding Kash Patel, she also basically said that there were numerous documents and huge tranches of productions that were withheld by the FBI before they got to her, giving a roadmap to Kash Patel, to Todd Blanche, who both I think are going to get impeached, and ultimately right at the top because Donald Trump was coordinating with them. And I'm sure they'll answer as well, executive privilege, executive privilege.
The vast majority of supplements have incredibly low absorption rates, meaning most of what people spend money on never actually gets used by the body. The absorption company is focused on solving that exact problem with pharmaceutical-grade absorption technology designed to help nutrients actually work. Because no matter how powerful a supplement is on paper, it only matters if your body can absorb it. The absorption company is singularly focused on solving the biggest problem in supplements: low absorption. Most supplements absorb at less than 16%, meaning over 84% of the supplements we take are completely wasted. 77% of Americans take supplements daily. We spend over $60 billion per year on supplements, and yet over 95% of us are still nutrient deficient. The supplements we're taking every day do not absorb well enough to work. The absorption company uses cutting-edge technologies to make the supplements with pharmaceutical-grade absorption up to 149 times better than standard supplements. Absorption is the one thing that affects all others. No matter how powerful vitamin D, magnesium, CoQ10, or any other supplement could be, it only works if it absorbs. Magnesium supports over 300 bodily functions. It promotes better sleep, supports muscle recovery, regulates stress and mood, and much more. But most magnesium absorbs between 4 to 8%, meaning over 90% is wasted. The absorption company's magnesium absorbs 8 times better than standard magnesium. So you get better sleep, better muscle recovery, and more. If you have tried magnesium and didn't feel that it was working, it wasn't your fault. It was the absorption's fault. Start taking supplements your body can actually absorb. Go to absorbmore.com and enter Meidas at checkout for up to 35% off your first order. That's absorbmore.com and enter Meidas at checkout for 35% off your first order.
So Pam Bondi said the following when the Democrats were saying, look, she's just blamed Blanche for everything. And she goes, not true. I praised Acting Attorney General Blanche's management of this Herculean task. task. I said his ethics are beyond reproach and that he's an incredible person. She's almost saying that sarcastically, right? Like she's given you the roadmap for impeaching Trump and impeaching Blanche right now. And the Democrats' response, chef's kiss, was LOL, LMAO. Even. What are you talking about? Now, I'll show you what Democratic Congress member Garcia said when he said, I was asking Bondi 5 different questions about her conversation with Trump on the Epstein files. Here, play this clip.
I also personally asked the former AG 5 times and 5 different questions about her conversations with President Trump, whether he directed her at any given time on the Epstein files, what he knew, what he asked her to redact or not, and she refused to answer any questions about President Trump. In fact, she said that she would not speak or respond to any questions that had anything to do with President Trump. It's also interesting that sitting next to her is DOJ counsel, somebody that currently works for the Department of Justice, who on multiple occasions stepped in and told the former Attorney General that she was not going to answer those questions, and especially when we asked questions of what the president directed her to do. And so the DOJ is in there right now stopping questions about President Trump and about what happened in the release of these files and why so many survivors were doxxed and their information, of course, released to the public.
And just so you can see for yourself, here's what Pam Bondi's lawyer had to say. And when I say Pam Bondi's lawyer, Harmeet Dillon is also the number 3 at the entire Department of Justice. And when you're a lawyer at the Department of Justice, you're not allowed to represent someone in their official capacity, in your official capacity, while you're in the DOJ. But that's why they said, this is just an informal meeting. It's not a deposition, because if it's a deposition, then you're not allowed to do it. But they said, we can have the DOJ be there because it was merely informal and not an actual deposition. Go figure. Here's what Harmeet Dillon had to say. Bondi's lawyer, but really the number 3 at the DOJ. You're playing this clip.
What's your response to criticism that the presence of the department is a potential conflict for Ms. Bondi, given that her interests might diverge from the department?
That is silly, and I really didn't.
Did you advise her not to answer questions on particular topics?
I'm sorry?
Did you advise her not to answer questions on particular topics with the president?
Well, there was the committee before we walked in there, and we simply wanted to stick to the temporal limitations as well as subject matter limitations.
But why did you tell her not to answer specific questions?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into my reasoning. That's, we represent the Department of Justice, and that's between us and the department.
And here's what Democratic Congress member Ro Khanna had to say about Bondi continuing to throw Todd Blanche under the bus. Let's play this clip.
What we wanted here was just answers to help the survivors. And what she told us is that Todd Blanche was really managing the whole thing. So we need to ask Todd Blanche questions. She also told us, surprisingly, that the FBI it scrubbed a lot of the documents or held a lot of the documents before they got to the Justice Department. That means that we need to ask Kash Patel, why were those documents redacted or what documents were missing? And then finally, when pressed on whether some of the individuals should be prosecuted, whether they should be investigated, she deferred to Jay Clayton, who's the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. And so we need to ask him, what is going to happen to the people who raped or abused or trafficked the victims?
And we heard from Congresswoman Ansari, who talked about what a ridiculous charade this all was. Let's play this clip.
Today's ridiculous charade has made astonishingly clear that the United States Department of Justice has been weaponized by Donald Trump to ensure that the most massive cover-up in American history is carried out. And this is being enabled by Republicans in Congress, led by Republican Chairman James Comer and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. This entire Epstein investigation, led by Chairman Comer, has been absurd. We have 2 legal subpoenas against former Attorney General Pam Bondi. She is supposed to be here under oath today on video, answering questions for the American people about her role and the direct hand that she had in this cover-up. Instead, she is deflecting, she is refusing to answer questions, and she continues to refuse to answer specific questions about the President of the United States. It is so clear that whether it be Pam Bondi, whether it be Chairman Comer, whether it be Mike Johnson, the entire party is terrified of Donald Trump and his retaliation as it pertains to the cover-up of the Epstein files. It's unacceptable. It is notable that she continues to blame Todd Blanche and Kash Patel. We, of course, want to speak to them, but I think what I want to make clear to the American public and to everybody and to the survivors especially is that we are not going to give up on this. I think Republicans believe that they just kind of carry out these nonsense transcribed interviews and don't show up here today, that we will forget about this. We are just getting started as it pertains to accountability and justice for the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and any other rich and powerful person in this country who perpetrated these crimes.
Then we heard from Congresswoman Stansberry, who said, do you realize also not a single Republican showed up to this meeting with Bondi? I mean, literally, the central figure, Bondi, in the cover-up of the Epstein files. Not a single Republican Congress member was there. Doesn't that just tell you everything? And why do you think Trump ordered them not to show up? Obviously, and they knew it would offend Donald Trump if they were there. James Comer had to be there because he chairs the committee, and he's been involved in the cover-up by allowing Bondi to not testify under oath and to not testify on videotape. But anyway, here's what Stansberry had to say. Play this clip.
Now, I also want to point out that there is not a single Republican in the room besides the chairman. For a supposed group of individuals who care deeply about justice for the survivors, not a single Republican could be bothered to travel across the country today to come hear testimony from the former Attorney General. Not one. They're not here. And they won't allow this interview to be put on video for the American people to see. And that means that only those of us who are allowed in the room can tell you what is actually happening. And what I can tell you is that when we started to ask difficult questions, Ms. Bondi got combative. The DOJ attorneys began rolling their eyes. They started intervening, and they tried to shut down any questions about the president and this administration's handling of the files.
And then Stansberry also talks about how the fact that the DOJ was intervening and interjecting and interrupting after all of these questions just shows you that this cover-up continues. If Bondi felt good about her work, which she should if you were doing the right thing and she wasn't, then she would be out there talking about what she did to track down the pedos, to find the bad guys, to go after the bad guys. But the fact that they keep on hiding it, we know what's going on. I mean, this cover-up is so absurd, so offensive, especially we're dealing with children. We're dealing with the cover-up of a child sex trafficking ring by this Epstein class. And it's just so sad and it's so sickening. Here, play this clip.
If Pam Bondi was complying with a congressional deposition to testify under oath, Department of Justice attorneys would not be intervening and essentially trying to stop her from answering basic questions about her conversations with Donald Trump, with the administration, and trying to claim that she does not have to answer questions. In fact, as the ranking member said, she has been asked multiple times about the Trump administration, about her conversations with the president, about her conversations with other administration officials. And when asked specifically about a conversation with Donald Trump, one of the Department of Justice attorneys intervened and said that she did not have to answer the question because it was a voluntary interview, and said, in fact, quote, "We don't even have to assert privilege because of that," and said, quote, "We refuse to provide answers." That means that the United States Department of Justice is intervening on behalf of Pam Bondi to stop her from answering questions about what happened in the cover-up of this case and her conversations with Donald Trump, and is asserting that she does not have to answer questions because she is not required to, because she is not being deposed under oath. This is a cover-up. This will be remembered as the largest cover-up likely in American history, and it is clear that this interview is a smokescreen to try to show the American people that they are complying while they are not.
More from Democratic Congressmember Garcia, who said, you know, it's beyond disappointing at this point, but it's par for the course with these Trump, MAGA, Epstein-class people that they wouldn't have her sit for a deposition under oath and on video camera. Let's play this clip.
I just want to be very clear that we continue to be incredibly disappointed of the decision to not have this interview videotaped and then released to the American public. The second thing we asked Chairman Comer is to ensure that this interview is under oath. We understand the Attorney General is going to be there answering questions from Congress, but it should have been under oath and it should be videotaped. We obviously have a lot of questions as it relates to why only 50% of the files have been released, why many of the survivors were literally put in danger by the way the files were released, that private information should never have been released, and of course, why this continues to be some type of cover-up. And so those are our questions. There's many questions. We'll be here for the next few hours. But it's really important that we get to the truth and that the Attorney General answers the questions truthfully. And we'll continue to push, of course, for a videotape release transcript for everybody else. So.
And then he talks about how she blamed Blanche for everything. Let's play this clip.
It is clear in just this part of the interview that she continues to push all of the investigation and the blame on acting AG Todd Blanche. She said, and I quote, "Acting AG Blanche was managing the entire investigation," end quote. And what you're going to hear in that interview and what she's saying here in her words and remarks is that it was Todd Blanche, the current acting AG, that was leading the Epstein investigation. And quite frankly, all of the mistakes that we saw, the redactions, not protecting survivors, she continues to push that back onto the acting AG, Todd Blanche, who, by the way, was Donald Trump's former personal lawyer.
Now, as I mentioned at the outset, what I think this also gathers a lot of evidence on in terms of Trump's impeachment is his direct violation of the Epstein Transparency Act, that he's behind all of this, right? That's why they were instructing Bondi not to answer these questions about her communications with Trump. What's the executive? You're claiming an executive privilege over cover-up of child sex trafficking ring? I mean, that's an executive. I mean, the argument you're making is that it's within the course and scope of presidential duties to cover up child sex trafficking. Really? I mean, do we all realize how they've so demeaned and degraded the Oval Office where that's essentially what they're saying? Otherwise, if there was nothing to hide, why wouldn't you just say what your conversations were with Donald Trump? And so that sheds light on this. And again, hat tip to Jason Leopold over at Bloomberg. He says, a couple of weeks ago, the Department of Justice released an index that explained the legal exemptions the government is relying on to redact or withhold portions of records and the exemptions that are applicable under FOIA. And these are exemptions that the DOJ is asserting about why they're withholding documents, but they're not valid. They're just playing judge, jury on their own. And they're saying, we're just not going to turn it over, which will bring me to one final point, and I'll do an entire other video on this, and I'll show you how MeidasTouch is actually fighting back. So you look at over here and it says, here's why we're withholding documents. Category 5, privileged information. Information privileged under common law, including the deliberative process privilege, attorney work privilege, and the attorney-client privilege. And the deliberative process privilege they're claiming is this expansive investigative privilege that they're claiming allows them to withhold all of these documents. which I'll get to my last point here, which is what's the MeidasTouch Network doing about all of this? Well, Katie Fang from the MeidasTouch Network, she's out there filing a lawsuit under the Epstein Transparency Act, the first of its kind, demanding that these documents be turned over, demanding that the millions of records that are concealed be turned over immediately. And a federal judge ordered that that there needs to be an immediate response by Trump's DOJ to Katie Fang's lawsuit. And so we'll keep you posted and apprised with that as well. So everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we appreciate you all so much.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.